You ever wake up to the lake smelling like pennies and know before you even see it that something awful happened? That was the first thing that hit me, a metallic bite on the air that made me think of old pocket change and stale pennies. And then I saw the water, that green-blue sick glow, and I knew Big Olive was gone. I'm Jonah Harlan. I've lived on this patch of land my whole life, my dad before me. And this little spring-fed pond, it's not just water, it's a history. So when someone tries to take that away, it's like they're reaching into your chest and pulling out the part that remembers home. We moved into Crescent Hollow because it felt honest gravel road, a row of maples, neighbors who borrowed sugar and mowed their own lawns. Then the subdivision came in like a sharp suit at a backyard cookout. New houses, new rules, a glossy HOA with a president who smiles like she's closing a deal. Her name was Evelyn Carrington. Polished, precise, the kind of person who believes order is the same as right. She bought into the community on day one and made it plain. There would be standards, and standards would be enforced. At first it was small things, the kind of petty paper cuts that sting more over time. A letter about the dock, it was not to code, they said. A notice about trimming, encroaching vegetation. A complaint about the creaky little boathouse that's been part of the place since my grandfather welded the hinges. Evelyn wore her rules like armor, and when I challenged a notice, she looked at me with that thin smile and said, "We're doing what's best for the community." But the community, in her mind, meant conformity. Mine meant memory. And when those words hit each other, sparks fly. The first confrontation wasn't loud. It was a meeting in the HOA room, lots of chairs, a projector with an earnest slide about property values. Evelyn spoke like someone reading a manifesto to applause. I stood up and read aloud from my deed. The original one from 1954, water rights clearly stated, the words yellowed but legible, this parcel includes perpetual water usage. The room grew quiet, like breath caught on winter glass. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "That's an old document," she said, not hiding the contempt. "Covenants change." The words were small but heavy, like someone shifting the furniture in a house you still sleep in. Things escalated after that. Notices multiplied, fines, threats of litigation, and then the harassment started. Leaf blowers at dawn, chainsaws where silence used to be, surveyors measuring 6 inches of shoreline like it was a crime scene. I'd stand on the dock with coffee cooling in my hands and feel like I was on trial in my own yard. My neighbors were divided. Some liked the manicured lawns and the order, some didn't know enough to stand with me. Evelyn, she played the role of community mother and corporate steward at once. And when you have committees and donors behind you, the smallest idea can become a movement. Then one night, the night the lake changed, someone drove a truck through the dark and emptied a load along the bank. And by morning, the water looked like a postcard from a place no one wanted to visit. Fish floated, bellies up, like sad, small moons. The ducks kept their distance. The wildlife left a silence you could feel. It was ugly in a way that broke something inside me, not just because of the loss, but because it felt deliberate, personal. I remember walking the shoreline, picking up a base that used to be the size of my forearm, and thinking, who would do this? And why to our water? We got a hazmat team, lab tests, the whole bureaucratic orchestra. The findings came back fast enough to make your stomach drop, contaminants above safe levels. I took copies of the lab reports and sat in my living room while the words blurred and turned into a map of who could have done it. Then we pulled a single thread of time-lapse from a neighbor's security camera, a landscaping truck on the road that night, a receipt with a company name that traced back, curiously, to a vendor the HOA had been using. The more we dug, the messier it got. Money, convenience, and a certain hunger to fix things without asking were tangled together, and Evelyn's name kept cropping up in the margins. I remember walking up to her house, hammering on the front door, and when she opened it, she did that thing people do when they think they're about to be inconvenienced. "Jonah," she said, eyes cool. "We're handling it." I told her what I knew. She smiled like someone who folds up the truth to make room for comfort. "Accidents happen," she said. "Landscaping mistakes." I could feel the words like a slap. "This wasn't an accident," I said. Her lips tightened. "You're being dramatic." And there it was, the pivot from community leader to defendant. You can feel a person change in real time, where the warmth goes out of their face and clarity takes over. We hired a lawyer after that, a practical, no-nonsense woman named Claire Mendoza who didn't believe in theatrics. She said, in a voice that became my anchor. Document everything. And so we did. We cataloged dead fish, time-stamped footage, kept every receipt and every message. We tested wells, every neighbor's water, because the aquifer doesn't respect property lines. It was frightening to see how much was shared beneath our feet. The contamination wasn't just an act against an old man's pond, it threaded through pipes and into people's lives. And suddenly the argument wasn't property versus aesthetics, it was public health. When Claire and I presented the evidence at the town hall, the room was full, not the sleepy crowd from before, but people who were angry and afraid and hungry for answers. I read the lab numbers out loud and watched faces go white, watched the same recognition settle over them that had settled over me. This was serious. Evelyn tried to steer the meeting like a captain riding a listing ship, but the documents kept slipping off her steering wheel. A journalist from the regional paper was there, and once a story finds a pen and an audience, things move faster than you expect. The arrest, when it finally happened, felt both surreal and inexorable. Evelyn was led out in handcuffs that glinted under the fluorescent lights at a community barbecue she'd organized, an event meant to soothe nerves and show leadership. She was calm when they took her, politely asking to retrieve her handbag, like a woman who could not quite accept that her script had ended. The charges were specific and heavy: environmental violations, falsifying records, obstruction. Watching her hauled away, neighbors who once nodded politely now whispered, "How could she?" The sense of betrayal was a physical thing, dense and sharp. But justice wasn't the end of the story. In the weeks after, cleanup teams arrived with pumps and filters and slow-moving, hopeful machinery. Experts planted reeds and set up bioremediation plans, slow, patient work to coax something living back out of poisoned water. We restocked fish carefully, under the eye of scientists, and the first few small fry released into the shallows felt like a fragile triumph. The restoration came with a cost: financial settlements to fund long-term testing, fines that would never bring back the exact water we once had, but it brought with it a change in how Crescent Hollow governed itself. New transparency measures, independent audits, an insistence on community voices rather than closed-door decisions. For me, recovery was more private. I'd stand on the dock at dawn, watching the mist lift off the water, and feel bones of grief and stubbornness knitting back together. There's a scar there, of course. The pond looks different, quieter in ways I can't fully explain, and I find myself checking the water's edge more often, protective in a way that's part tenderness and part suspicion. But at the same time, there's laughter again, neighbors launching small, careful boats, folks who once stayed distant now helping plant native grasses along the bank. The lake belongs to all of us, and maybe that's the real lesson. Ownership isn't just a line on a deed, it's a responsibility. I won't pretend everything is neat. Evelyn's trial opened up debates that didn't end in a courtroom about power in small towns, about what we ask our neighbors to be, about whether the desire for order ever justifies the harm it causes. People have different answers. Some think she was a villain, plain and simple. Others say pressure and management got twisted into something ugly. For me, it's less about labels and more about consequence. When you centralize decision-making, you risk hurting the very things you say you protect. So here I am, telling you this because small things can go very wrong, and because when they do, we tend to learn what our community actually is. If you've ever been on the side of someone trying to hold on, whether it's to a piece of land, a tradition, or a small pocket of peace, I want to know what happened. Was justice served? Was it enough? Drop a comment and tell me what you think. Should rules be absolute? Or should the people they affect have the loudest say? Share this if it struck a chord, and if you've lived through something like this, tell us where you were and what you did. I'll be reading.